Hi, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for another PB&J card class. And today I'll be making a sweet little card featuring our new miniature 3x4-inch transparent set called Tweetie. And before I begin, I just wanted to pop up all of the supplies that I'll be using on this card. And this includes all the ink colors, stamps, dies, as well as the Copic colors that I'll be using. And I will put both of these supply lists up at the very end of the video up on screen. So at that time, if you'd like to look at them in more detail, you can just hit pause and peek at them. And to begin, I'm going to color the super cute image in using Copic markers. So I stamped this onto Neenah's Solar White cardstock using Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And I did this in my stamp positioning tool so that I was able to do multiple impressions in order to get a really nice dark, great outline before I began my coloring. I'm doing just a very basic shading. On her shirt, I wanted to keep that white, so I'm just adding some gray in here along the sides and blending that out to give it a finished look. Typically, when I do my coloring, like I did at the shorts there, on the shorts there at the very beginning, I start with the darkest color and then add in my medium and light tones. But this image is just very easy to color in. It's a great one if you are a beginner because there isn't too much detail, but all of the open areas leave an advanced colorist lots of room to add shading and details. So I kept her shoes and her shirt white, and I'm adding a few pink areas here on the heart and her socks. And as I'm coloring this in, I'm also keeping in mind what colors I may want to use on my background. So I know that I wanted a nice light blue sky and perhaps some pink flowers, so I wanted to incorporate those into my coloring here. I'll do some very subtle shading on this adorable little bird. I think this is such a sweet image. It could be used definitely for Valentine's Day, also for friendship cards, or if you have anyone you know that loves birds, this would be a fun card. You can add whatever sentiment you add would make it personal if you know they love birds. And that's something I really love about Penny Black's sort of Valentine love theme collection is that it is so versatile. You don't have to make just Valentine cards with it. They can be used for so many different occasions, anniversaries, just anything that you really need something that is happy and about love. To color her skin, I'm also doing just very basic shading. I started with my primary shade, and then I will add a little bit darker shading up here around her hairline, a little bit on her nose, on her neck, a few spots on her legs, mostly just looking for some variation in color, darkening up some areas that are near, like where her legs have been bent, up here under her hair and under her chin, places that would be in shadow. And with that darker shading on, I'll go back and blend that with my lighter colors. And I also am adding some blush for her cheeks, so a little bit of pink, and I will blend that with the same lightest color that I used on her skin tone. Next, I'll work on her hair. I started by sort of deciding where I wanted the lightest areas of the hair to be, and I colored those in, just trying to be sure to conserve those areas of light. Then I am taking my next color and feathering that in to those lighter areas. And you can see that where I stop coloring with that darker color, try to sort of lift up the marker and give it a feathered edge instead of an edge that just goes straight across. And that adds and makes it look more like hair. And I will go back with one other darker color doing the same thing, but not extending quite as far up into that lighter color. I just keep going back and adding more layers until I am really happy with the look. And I'll go back and blend that with the lightest color. And then I'll color her ear. I don't know why I forgot that earlier, but I'll go ahead and give some coloring to that. I added a touch of that green that was on the bird to her belt just to balance out the color in the design. And I decided I want her cheeks just to look a little bit more rosy, so I picked up that lightest color from the heart in her socks and did that with the lighter blush color I originally used and added it onto her cheeks. And I did have a little bit of that pink that sort of bled outside, and I just covered it up with a white gel pen. So I went ahead and fussy cut her out, and now I'm ready to work on my background. I'm going to use these die cuts from my stash to embellish that background. Fresh Breeze. I will trim off the flowers from Shall We Dance. And the butterfly heart pop out, I'm actually going to use the negative portion of that die cut to create the back panel of my card, as you can see there. So I dug all those die cuts out of my stash, and I just arranged them onto the front of my card before I begin to color them. Often I do snap a picture with my phone at that point before I slide them all off in case I forget where I wanted things to go when I go to assemble the card again. I wanted the look of these sort of palm branches to match the green of the bird. So I'm using the same Copic colors that I used on the bird to color them in. So I do like to either match up with the Copic markers or my Distress inks or Memento inks to match the coloring that I've already done. I think it ties everything together. Same thing here with these flowers. I trimmed them away from the Shall We Dance die. So I trimmed them off of the stems, and I'm coloring them with the same Copic markers that I used for the heart on her shirt and also for her socks. Now for the ground or the little hill that she's sitting on, I just hand trimmed this from Nina Solar White cardstock, and I'm going to ink this with Memento ink. I'm using a jumbo sponge applicator tool, and this is the color of New Sprout. So this has a sort of a brighter green than I typically use for my ground or greenery, but I thought it just went very well with that bird. I'm also adding just a very, very light touch of Bahama Blue ink to give it that turquoise look. And you can see there how well that matched up with the Copic coloring. Darkening up the New Sprout just by adding a few more layers on there. I'm going to clean off my work surface so none of that green transfers onto this background. And now I am going to ink up my background. And I'm using Danube Blue and Summer Sky inks. And here's that card front that I used, and I used that butterfly heart die cut, but I'm using the negative space. So don't forget when you're looking through your dies for different ideas that you may just want to use the negative space that's left over from a die that has a very basic shape. And this particular heart is a great size. This fits really well onto the standard size card, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and it just is a really nice classic heart shape. So first I put on that Summer Sky ink, and now I'm adding the Danube Blue. I want that to be darker towards the bottom where the sky meets that little hand-trimmed hill. And I don't want to go too dark because I am going to be doing some blue on the interior portion of that heart. And I want there to be some contrast between the blue that's on the front and the blue that is on the inside of the heart. I like to start light when I'm inking though and then build up the layers as I go. It's easier to start light and get darker, but if you go too dark from the beginning, then you have to start over. So I try to play it safe when I first start putting my ink colors on. So I've just layered that over a card panel, and while it's being held in place by the magnets on my Misty stamp positioning tool, I'm going to stamp my sentiment. I'm using Versamark ink, and I did run an anti-static bag over that background piece. That just helps the embossing powder only stick where you stamp and not stick all over the background too. Just checking to see that I got a good impression, and it looks like I did. So I will sprinkle that with white embossing powder, and I will heat to set. Now once that has been melted and is dry, I'm going to take that Danube Blue, and I'm actually pressing the actual ink pad right on top because I wanted this to be really rich, dark color, but still coordinate with the inking that we did on the other panel. So I first pressed the ink pad right onto the paper. Now I'm taking that sponge applicator tool and applying ink on top. And this gets right into all those little crevices on the scripty font that we stamped and embossed. And I'll use a dry paper towel just to buff off any excess ink that's on that embossed area. Now I felt that these just didn't have quite enough contrast when I started layering them onto the background. So I'm taking just a fingertip dauber and a little bit of that Bahama Blue ink. And I'm just very lightly trying to ink that right just towards the center so that it's darker in the center, and as the leaves extend, then they get lighter on the tip. I went a little crazy with my foam dots. I didn't have my nice adhesive roll of foam adhesive, so I had to use all the little dots there on that background. But it worked out, and I'm just gluing that over that panel. So this is popped up with the sentiment down flatter in the background. This would also be a nice design for a shaker card if you wanted to add some shaker elements there inside of that heart. I'm going to glue down my little hill. And this background in this scene would really be great with any of the new character or critter stamps that are part of Penny Black's newest Love Theme collection. With that heart in the back, you could switch up what you wanted the sentiment to say, but this overall design would be really great with any of those different images. You could just switch your focal point design to give it a different look. Now I'm going to glue her flat right onto the card, right on the front there. And now I can start adding these background elements. And it's so fun at this point of the card. I mean, I really like all the different steps in creating these scene cards. But when you start putting it all together, it just feels good too to see all those different colored elements come together. Now I almost totally forgot to add, I like to outline the image here that I fussy cut using a Memento Tuxedo black marker. It just gives a much more finished look and hides any imperfections. So luckily I remembered before that glue was dry and I could pull her up and just do that outlining real quick and get back to assembling the card. Just deciding where I want to put this one and adding it there. The glue dries very transparent, so if a little bit squirts out from behind or you move it a little bit, I really find it is not noticeable. Now to make this die a little bit taller, I'm just layering two of those together. I also like the way it overlaps a little bit over that heart window that we created. Next, I'll add the flowers in. I'm just doing a little bit of rearranging with where I want those to go, fiddling around a lot. I'm not the only one that does that, am I? So I will put some glue now that I'm happy with a location for each flower. I'll put some glue. I'm just putting the glue towards the center of the flower, and I kind of curled up the petals to give them some extra dimension. And for the center of those flowers, there was just a touch of yellow on the coloring that I did earlier on the bird on his beak. So I'm going to use that same yellow to color some self-adhesive pearls to put in the center of the flowers. So I just colored those, and I'll lift them up with a piercing tool and drop them right onto the flowers. And that completes this design. Here's a look at the finished card. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to our channel. You can connect with Penny Black here on YouTube, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, also on our website and blog, and shop our online store. And I'll link to all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. And if you stay tuned here to the very end of the video, you will see those supply lists that I promised.